from the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View with your host, Jesse Tenor.
Good Sunday morning to you and welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jesse Tenor. This morning I'll be joined by the Democratic candidate looking to unseat Congressman Rick Crawford in Arkansas's 1st District, plus an in-depth look at the ex-lobbyist at the center of numerous public corruption scandals. And later we remember Democratic Party Chair Bill Gwatney, now 10 years after his death. We begin with the legal challenge, though, to the new work requirements for Medicaid beneficiaries in Arkansas. Earlier this year, the Trump administration gave Arkansas the go-ahead to require able-bodied people who get their health care through Arkansas Works to have a job, in school, or volunteer. People who don't comply risk losing their coverage within 3 months. On Tuesday, Arkansas Legal Aid filed a lawsuit in Washington, D.C. on behalf of 3 people who stand to lose their coverage because of the new rules. The only way for people to report that they're complying is to go online. An attorney for the plaintiffs say this has caused a great deal of trouble for those who depend on this coverage. A similar legal challenge in Kentucky earlier this summer was successful, though the Trump administration has been pushing to allow them to take effect. Governor Hutchinson called the lawsuit disappointing, adding this lawsuit has one goal, which is to undermine our efforts to bring Arkansans back into the workforce, increase worker training, and to offer improved economic prospects for those who desire to be less dependent on the government. Turning now to the November elections, Arkansas Democrats are looking to cut into the GOP's stranglehold in the state. Just 2 years ago, only one of the 4 races for U.S. House featured a Democratic candidate. Now, all 4 of them do. In 2016, Congressman Rick Crawford beat a Libertarian candidate with 76% of the vote. This year, the race looks a lot different. Joining me now is the Democratic candidate challenging Congressman Crawford, Chintan Desai. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you're a political newcomer. You're a son of Indian immigrants, and then you moved to Helena, Arkansas from California to work for Teach for America. And so you're now running against a 4-term congressman who didn't even face a Democratic challenger the last time around. So why did you look at this race and say, this is the one I need to try for?
Yeah, I think about the story of my parents who moved to this country, and they had to leave behind their family, their friends, everything they knew to come to this country to, have a good life and to make sure that I had a good life. And they worked incredibly hard. They still work there to this, my dad flips burgers, my mom works at an arts and crafts store, and they still work there to this day. And what I've seen, what I've noticed in the time that I've been here is that there are too many Arkansans who feel like they have to leave Arkansas to find a better life. I see young people who don't feel like they have the jobs that they want and need here. I see seniors whose families have left them. And to exacerbate all that, we've got a congressman who simply doesn't listen to his constituents. He has shut down his Facebook page. He refuses to hold town halls. He has a constituent office in the district that literally has cobwebs in the doors. And you take all that and all the issues that we're facing, you have a congressman that doesn't even listen to you. That's when I said, yeah, I want to make sure that someone is challenging him and actually listens to people.
And then you hope to represent the 1st District, which is, of course, very rural, and it's largely dependent on agriculture. And then right now, we have a lot of Arkansas farmers. They're making certain adjustments because of the Trump administration's tariffs against China and then some of our European allies. And so are you hearing, what sort of anxiety are you hearing from farmers in that district? Are a lot of people saying, I'm going to have to go out of business, or what are you specifically hearing?
You mentioned the word uncertainty. I think that's the biggest key theme that we're taking away from all this, is that farmers are uncertain about the future, and that's leading to, obviously, we've seen the price reductions, particularly in soybeans, lowest price in a decade. This is not fair to our farmers. There's essentially collateral damage for our president's trade war, essentially for our president wanting to pick a fight. And we have a congressman who's been a full-throated supporter of these tariffs from the beginning. We just need to make the connection even clearer to people, is that you do have a congressman that's supporting these tariffs, and yeah, we're certainly hearing from farmers that they're not fans of this, and they don't like the uncertainty.
Like you said, Crawford is one of the supporters of this. He's been saying, China's been taking advantage of us and for a long time, and the Arkansans are willing to give the president the benefit of the doubt here. But where do you fall on that stance? What is it already too long? Do we need to give them a little more time to see how things flesh out? What do you think?
Look, I think I would want to go in a different direction here. If we're talking about trade, if we're talking about free and fair trade, right now there's an incredible incentive for, in any trade deal, such as NAFTA, for any corporation to want to offshore jobs or stagnate wages. There's essentially this race to the bottom to find markets where you can where those conditions exist. And so I think what we need to do is get to a point where we have better trade deals, we negotiate better trade deals, we involve labor in the negotiation of those trade deals. That's actually a long-term solution. And then actually, let's make sure that we include our allies. Let's make sure we include Canada, Mexico, the EU, if we're wanting to go after China. Right now, we're doing the exact opposite of that. And so I think the approach the president has in terms of going after China, in terms of some of these practices, is not the right one.
And then, as mentioned, you have a background in education, so you describe consolidation and underfunding in school districts in eastern Arkansas. So what are your biggest priorities in terms of improving schools, and how can Congress make that happen from the federal level?
Absolutely. To me, it's federal investment and making sure that that exists and that we're fully funding certain programs and priorities, particularly in low-income areas. To me, there are three particular priorities that I want to tackle. One, getting to a point where we have voluntary universal pre-K. You start kids earlier. I've seen it firsthand being an educator. They have better options and better education once they get to kindergarten. Second, we need to train, support, and pay teachers like the professionals they are. Right now in Arkansas, we're about 39th in the country in terms of teacher pay. That's simply not cutting it. And then lastly, we need to make sure that post-secondary options are affordable to people. So two things in particular, I'd want to make sure that college for any family making $125,000 a year or less is free in-state for those families, for those kids of those families. And then two, this is the big one, college is not for everyone. I get that. Let's make sure we're expanding, protecting the Perkins Act so that more kids have access to career, technical, vocational training opportunities and then can actually use those skills here in Arkansas.
And then we have been seeing a conversation at the federal level. We've had the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions here visiting the 4th District looking at different plans for school safety, and he has talked about some DOJ funds already being allocated to school districts across the country. As far as school safety goes, what do you see as a plan there? Do you think that Congress needs to mandate kind of at least something for all school districts should do, or should it be district-wide? Where do you stand?
I'll tell you what we need to mandate. It shouldn't be arming teachers. It ought to be mental health care, making sure that we have the right amount of counselors and the right amount of care and the right amount of training for those counselors. To me, if you were talking about specifically arming teachers, that is not addressing the root of the problem. And I'll tell you, I don't think, I've been a former educator myself, with all the things that you're throwing at teachers, from learning content, managing student behavior, managing parent relationships, and you're paying them what they are, and now in addition you want to try to arm some of them. To me, that's not the right use of resources. Let's make sure that kids, when they're in school, are getting the right mental health care they need, the right counseling services, and right now the investment is just not there.
And then if elected, you'd represent a district with some of the poorest areas in the state. What does Congress need to do to generate more economic development and rebuild some of the crumbling infrastructure in the 1st District? That's one of the biggest issues.
It goes back to investment. And I've traveled all 30 of these counties. I actually visited every single county, 30 counties in 30 days during the month of July, and I saw a lot of great things. Fortunately, I also saw a lot of roads that are crumbling, a lot of bridges in disrepair, energy systems that are not working. Let's actually invest in maintaining some of the things that we already have. We talk about building new things, but there are a bunch of, again, federal infrastructure projects that are out there that if we invested in could make sure that first of all, jobs are being created because you are investing in those projects. And then a lot, if you're talking about roads, if you're talking about some of those things, a lot of commerce can be created as well.
Every congressional candidate, of course, across the country, since you brought up health care, they're going to field questions about that. I mean, this campaign cycle, we have Democratic Socialists talking single payer, then we have an increasing number of candidates pushing Medicare for all, and then, of course, Republicans already saying that, they want to try to strip the Affordable Care Act without a replacement model. What's your vision on health care moving forward?
Yeah, first and foremost, if we're talking about in the system that exists right now, people do need to realize that congressional Republicans right now, if you have a pre-existing condition, and that can be asthma, that can be diabetes, high blood pressure, they want to take your health care away. And that needs to be repeated over and over, particularly for the Democratic congressional candidates who want to win and want to do well. Beyond that, the direction that we absolutely need to eventually get to is a single-payer healthcare system, so that we do have this public healthcare system that folks can pay into, and that we can make sure that everyone is getting high-quality care. I understand that that's not something that can simply happen overnight, and so I would want to first introduce the public option, something that should have been in the piece of legislation, the ACA, from the get-go. But that's how I would want to eventually get us to a point where we're single payer.
Okay. And then Arkansas has actually never elected a non-white member to Congress in the House or Senate. And so, I mean, you're looking to represent a district that's 80% white, that Trump won by 35 points. Have you run into challenges in that regard since you have visited all 30 counties?
Sure. Initially, there can be some challenges there in terms of just getting your name out there, winning support from people, earning trust from people. But I'll tell you what, I go back to the initial point that I made. When you actually visit them in person, when you actually sit down and have a conversation with them, when you actually talk to them about what they care about and what their issues are, you realize that you have a lot more in common, and they also realize that I'm actually not that scary and that I'm actually someone that is fighting to represent them. So I'm proud of the work that we're doing. I'm proud of the fact that we're getting people activated that haven't been activated before, and I think that we can surprise a lot of people in terms of how well we do.
Okay, well, I guess a lot to be seen ahead of November, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Chintan Desai, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jesse.
And coming up after a quick break, we'll take a closer look at the man at the center of a wave of corruption scandals at the state capitol. Here are the details of Rusty Cranford's dealings and the consequences of them. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
I relate to the berries in these real fruit berry shakes because they're small but powerful. I relate to the ice cream because it's rich and has an amazing singing voice. Got it.
Get new real fruit berry shakes and download the app to try order ahead and get happy hour anytime.
Sold it, sold it, sold it.
Attention land buyers, developers, hunters, and fishermen. Hennard Ranch Real Estate Auction, Wednesday, August 29th at 10 a.m. 131 Palarm Creek Road in Conway, Arkansas. 416 acres bordering Lake Conway. With a remodeled 2,000 square foot home, 5 ponds, food plots, pine and hardwood timber. Offered in 8 tracks and combinations. Go to wilsonauctioneers.com.
Sold it, sold it, sold it.
Nothing impacts your home's comfort and value like structural issues. So when you're looking for someone to address foundation issues, water or moisture problems, or settling concrete, it's important to call the real experts. Here in our area, you'll find those experts at Redeemers Group. Call us for wall cracks. Call us for doors and windows that stick. Call us for water and moisture. Most of all, call us because you can trust us to treat you and your home with care and respect. Call for a free, no-obligation inspection today.
Hi, I'm Missy Gibson. My family and I would like to invite you to see all that John Gibson Auto Sales has to offer. We have one of the largest, most diverse, and newest inventory of any buy here, pay here dealers in the state. We have cars, trucks, SUVs, motorcycles, ATVs, campers, performance trailers, and boats. Whether you have good credit, bad credit, or no credit, we will finance you. Check us out at johngibsonautosales.com and we will have your purchase ready when you get here.
To 50-cent corn dogs, the greatest invention of all time.
To their golden corn breading.
Yeah, and to 2 handsome guys in the prime of their lives.
Yes, to me and that guy, wherever he may be.
For one day only, Sonic's corn dogs are just 50 cents. Get them all day, August 23rd.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. As we've been following for months, several current and former lawmakers have been implicated in a series of corruption scandals tied to one ex-lobbyist. Actually, the cover story of this week's Arkansas Times chronicles the saga of Rusty Cranford. And joining me from Florida is the author of that article, David Ramsey with the Arkansas Nonprofit News Network. David, good morning.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I have to say, too, as a Better Call Saul fan, I enjoyed your headline from one journalist to another.
There you go. Well, we try.
One line in your story pretty well sums up the Rusty Cranford era. At various times over the last 5 years, Arkansas's government was taken hostage by a criminal enterprise. Lobbying is, by its nature, a shady business in the eyes of the public, whether it's for nonprofits that help the public good or big business like oil and gas. Cranford was lobbying for health services. What kind of behavior made his lobbying cross the line into dirty, unethical, and illegal?
Right, and I should say at the beginning that the niche that he was lobbying for was behavioral health providers who are the folks on the ground that are doing that work are doing very important work. But the Medicaid pot was kind of a big pot of money, and what Rusty Cranford did, I think the thing that probably is the most striking is that in order to sort of get favorable outcomes for his clients and get public grant money for his clients, he had some legislators, or at least what he has said in his guilty plea, is that he bribed some legislators. And in some cases that was through cash payments, In some cases, that was through favors. Because he was working for a nonprofit, their status as a tax-exempt nonprofit meant that they were not allowed to engage in certain forms of political advocacy, including campaign contributions, and so they would sort of surreptitiously run those campaign contributions through Cranford's lobbying firm to kind of conceal them. And even the lobbying itself, there are limits on how much a nonprofit group like this can do. They're allowed to do it, but there are certain limits and there are certain reporting requirements. And so another thing that Cranford was involved in doing was kind of he would set up a so-called consulting contract, but in fact he was lobbying, and this allowed them to kind of dodge some of the disclosure requirements. So this was a person who I think had a somewhat of a reputation for years as operating in a gray area. And at least according to the court filings in the last 5 or 6 years, that gray went he went to coloring outside the line. We'll put it that way.
Like you mentioned, the nonprofit that Cranford did work for, Preferred Family Health Care, specializes in physical and mental health services at dozens of facilities in Arkansas and other states for that matter. Now it's lost its DHS contracts. Cranford isn't the only person, though, who worked there accused of committing crimes. So what other kind of activity was going on there?
Right, so you have, in addition to Cranford, Eddie Cooper, another former legislator who also worked there. He also pleaded guilty and was kind of a co-conspirator with Rusty Cranford. Another former executive there who was also a former state official named Robin Ravindran pleaded guilty. And then you have at least 4 top executives who have not been charged, but in several of the court filings, they're clearly identifiable as former Preferred Family executives, and they appear to be implicated as well. And the gist of what they were doing was trying to get as much public money as they possibly could, so that their revenues would go up, and they were generating, from the state of Arkansas, that was tens of millions of dollars annually. And the more money that they could get, basically the more money they would skim.
And David, you mentioned some of these names already, but just one of the things that set Cranford apart from other lobbyists out there is that instead of casting this wide net, you mentioned that he kind of zeroed in on a few lawmakers, foot soldiers as they're really referred to, and then worked them hard. I mean, your article was even saying that he would sit in some of these Capitol meetings and be texting them certain questions, things like that. There was expensive dinners. What different kind of incentives did he offer to get them on board and make them stay?
Right. So, I think one of the things that made Cranford probably a little bit different than the biggest name lobbyists is, who might have lots and lots of legislators that they're working all the time. That Cranford had a few foot soldiers, and the ones that we know about, of course, are the most about are those that have pled guilty. Hank Wilkins, who was in both the House and the Senate. Cranford routed basically tens of thousands of dollars through, Wilkins was a pastor as well, so Cranford routed money through his church. And John Woods, who was found guilty at trial, was another one who did a lot for Cranford in terms of getting grant money toward Cranford's clients. The main way that Cranford worked him was basically to give him cash payments. There's also he also got him hotel rooms in St. Louis for the 2013 World Series, make sure that he had very nice tickets. He also did that favor as well for Jeremy Hutchinson. Hutchinson, again, has not been charged, and he denies wrongdoing, but he clearly was another one that was getting some benefits, let's say, from Cranford, and at least according to Cranford's plea, in exchange for that was helping him in the legislature, helping him win these victories.
Yeah, and Senator Hutchinson's name keeps coming up, and again, just to reiterate, he hasn't been charged with a crime, but you mentioned this kind of gray area in state ethics laws as it relates to legal work. So how did Senator Hutchinson kind of fit into that?
So, it is not illegal for a lawmaker who is also a lawyer to, for example, vote on bills that could possibly impact a client that same lawmaker represents as an attorney in a private matter. And this kind of thing happens a lot because we have a part-time legislature, and anytime you have legislators who are involved in other work, you can have at least the potential for a conflict. So where this gets into a gray area is that, the accusation that Cranford made, and once again, Hutchinson does deny wrongdoing. He says that all of his legal work was on the up and up. But the accusation that Cranford makes in his plea is that basically Hutchinson was being paid ostensibly legal fees, but that in fact what those fees were for was for help in the legislature. So, it is, if you have a lawyer who is representing a client and they take action in the legislature that helps that client, that's not necessarily a bribe under the law unless there's a quid pro quo, which is what the feds allege. But that's not necessarily a bribe under the law. However, the incentives could kind of work in that same direction. So I think that's kind of the gray area that Jeremy Hutchinson, I think, was operating in a number of cases. And in this particular scenario, you have Cranford accusing him of basically it being a quid pro quo.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I mean, I have your article up right here, and like you were saying, you took a line from the Attorney General to end your article, so I'll do it to also end the interview. She says, unfortunately, there's a very large tangled web, and we could be hearing a lot more soon.
Yes, indeed, and I hope you'll check it out from the Arkansas Nonprofit News Network. It's a bit of a doozy, so I hope you all enjoy it.
All right, thanks, David. And when we come back, we remember Bill Gwatney 10 years after his sudden and tragic death. Hear from those who knew him well and who say his presence is sorely missed in today's political climate. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
It's Egg Fest at Townley Pool and Spa. Enjoy food, flavor, and fun as chefs share techniques, recipes, and tips for cooking on the Big Green Egg. 10 to 4, Saturday, September 8th. Townley is Arkansas's only platinum-level Big Green Egg dealer with a complete choice of models and accessories. Early bird tickets are $10 each now at townley.com. $15 the day of the event. Net proceeds benefit the Arkansas Food Bank.
Townley.
Sweat the details. It's what you do when the thing you're making isn't a thing. It's your reputation. The all-new Ram 1500. Comfortably the most luxurious truck in its class. And why more people are switching to Ram than ever before.
Get an average $11,400 in total values on the all-new 2019 Ram 1500. And competitive truck owners get an additional $1,000 bonus cash.
Sold it.
Attention Greers Ferry Lake Home buyers. Absolute real estate and personal property auction. 119 Cherokee Drive in Fairfield Bay, Arkansas. With a custom 3,162 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath home in Enchanted Peninsula subdivision, just steps from Greers Ferry Lake. Offered separately 2 boat slips, a Cobalt ski boat, designer household furnishings, tools, and much more. Everything is sell regardless of price. Friday, September 14th, starting at 10 a.m. Go to wilsonauctioneers.com.
Sold it.
Why do we keep making the fastest muscle cars in the world? Because once you've tasted American performance, you can never get enough. We're the Brotherhood of Muscle.
Right now, finance and get $4,250 total cash allowance on the 2018 Dodge Charger.
Is this the world's best sandwich? Nope. Lance's real peanut butter between 2 toasted crackers is the best. Pick up some tasty sandwich crackers from Lance.
Charlie's Paint and Body, a state-of-the-art collision repair facility recognized by automobile manufacturers. Charlie's has the highest level of training available, so we can give you a lifetime warranty and customer satisfaction every time. Come see us today.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. Last Monday marked 10 years since a gunman walked into the Arkansas Democratic Party headquarters and killed Chairman Bill Gwatney. Today, his legacy lives on. The building has even been renamed in his memory. But in the hectic and divisive political climate of 2018, many believe Gwatney's absence is as apparent as ever.
But it really wasn't anything out of the ordinary until it was.
On August 13th, 2008, the chairman of the Democratic Party of Arkansas came into headquarters to sign some paperwork. He wasn't supposed to be in that day.
That weighs on a number of people that I didn't realize till much later.
Mariah Hatta, the party's executive director at the time, was in Bill Gwatney's office when a man they didn't know came in.
He asked the chairman if he was Bill Gwatney, and the chairman said yes, and then the next thing I remember,
3 gunshots. Gwatney and the suspect died later that day.
I personally am thankful that we didn't have to go through a trial.
Michael John Gray now sits in Gwatney's seat, a position he didn't think about 10 years ago. Gray wasn't involved in politics, but August 13th still follows him at the office.
Just for a second in the back of your mind, I don't know this person, what's going on, and it's sad, frankly, but that's the first thing that goes through our minds a lot of times.
The effects travel down the street, crossing party lines. The current state Republican Party chairman was months away from being elected to the position.
There's Bill, and there I am.
But served in the Arkansas Senate with Gwatney for years.
We should respect each other for our political views, debate the issues, argue hard, but then shake hands, and however the votes fall, let them fall that way.
The chairman agreed the state of Arkansas politics would be less divisive with Gwatney in it.
He would have been a very strong candidate in that regard.
He was a natural pick to do what he wanted to do, frankly. People liked him that much.
Ahead of November's elections, what would a U.S. Senator, Congressman, even Governor Gwatney tell Arkansans?
He would say something along the lines of what Chairman Gray says. Democrats, they think for themselves. He definitely thought for himself, and they care for people, and he definitely cared for people.
And Bill Gwatney was set to be a superdelegate for Hillary Clinton at the 2008 Democratic National Convention just weeks after his death. At his funeral, then Senator Clinton, as well as President Bill Clinton and Governor Mike Beebe, were among those to share their favorite memories of him. And we're back to wrap it up all after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
When we do something at McClarty Nissan, we do it right. And you're not going to believe this. Brand new Titan XD diesels for $28,700. Plus, we're taking up to $15,000 off on nearly 200 new Titans in stock. And they come with America's best truck warranty, 5 years and 100,000 miles. These prices are so unbelievable, but we're making it happen for a limited time. Only at McClarty Nissan, where the reason we sell so many is because you pay so little.
This is Thomas Blackman of Blackman Auctions. It's time again for the Summer Arkansas Contractors Auction. This is our end of summer equipment and truck auction. This auction will include dozers, excavators, heavy trucks, pickup trucks, farm equipment, all kinds of trailers, ATVs, cars, and lots of miscellaneous building supplies. There truly is something for everyone at this auction. Sale runs from August 28th to the 30th, and sale starts each day at 8 a.m. Online bidding is available, consignments being accepted until sale day. For more information, go to blackmanauctions.com. Since 1938, better auctions are Blackman Auctions.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And that does it for today's show. We want to know your thoughts on all of the issues we discussed during Capitol View, among the many others affecting our state. So just make sure you keep using that hashtag MyCapitolView on Twitter and Facebook, both during and after the show, so we can continue the conversation together. We're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.